Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is GENIX-JS, a YouTube channel dedicated to teaching you what you need to know to get started with front-end web development. So in our last videos, I was building a contact form. I would say we because I had a lot of people viewing my videos, and I would love to say thank you very much for supporting me throughout the contact form series, even if it took a long time. I've had some videos recorded and I've had some videos being prepared. So in today's video, we're also going to be looking at a new series. As promised, I said I was going to dive into JavaScript fully and separately. And in the course of doing these videos, we're going to be building a very amazing project, which I'll be leaving, letting you guys know at the end of this video. So before we get started coding or learning JavaScript, I'd love to let you know that this channel is not only dedicated to beginners, but even also people that have started. So these videos are not only for beginners, but also for developers that have started their coding journey. I'll be sharing tips, and also I'll be sharing my coding journey from when I started, projects I've built, and also how you can leverage online platforms and free tools as a developer, and also building your web projects or any project at all that we build on this platform quickly. So with that out of the way, let's get started. So for those of us who have started following my videos from day one, the first thing I always like to do is to open VS Code. So if you don't have that installed, I'll leave the link to VS Code in the description below. So to open your VS Code, if you're on Windows, I would love you to click on the Start button on your keyboard. If you're on Mac, I would love you to click on the Search button and to Spotlight Search, go to Spotlight Search, and then type Visual Studio Code. So the installation process is quite easy. Just follow the instructions. So I'm going to be clicking on New Windows here. So now that I have VS Code opened, this is how my VS Code looks. But for the sake of reviews I've gotten, I'll be changing the theme real quickly. Okay, so now now that I've changed the theme of my VS Code to light. I know many of us don't usually use this, but just so you can see what I'm doing clearly, this was how I did it. I went to settings here, and then to themes, and then color theme, and then you can pick from the default here in VS Code. You can also install, but then you use extensions, which are extra programs, additional programs that can be installed into your VS Code to perform literally any task that you don't have to do from scratch. So now, as usual, I usually create my folder first. So to create your folder, this is what you do. You click on this left Explorer button, and then you click on Open Folder. So now it will bring up this dialog for you. You click on Desktop, because this is where I'll be having my project, the code base of the JavaScript series. So I'll click on Folder. I right clicked. So I'm going to do that again. So now I clicked on Open Folder, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to also right click and come here to New. So if you're on a Mac, I'm going to leave a list of steps, the link in the description below, to create a new folder. I'm assuming many of the beginners here still have to learn this. My bad, I'm just assuming, because this is a tutorial for beginners as well as those who have started their web development journey. So I'm going to type JavaScript and then click on Enter. So once I do that, I'm now going to click on Select Folder, right? And once you do that, you have something like this pop up for you. You have something like this. Just click on Yes, and then you can cancel this welcome screen. So we are concerned with this Explorer, please. So now, what is JavaScript? In today's video, we're going to be looking at the very basics of JavaScript, starting from variables and declaration of variables, right? So we're going to be looking at variables and the very basics of JavaScript, variables and variables declarations in this video. So this is going to be a very brief one, and then along the line, with more videos coming in, we're going to be looking at more JavaScript concepts until we finally build our exciting project, which I'll be leaving and telling you guys at the end. So now, in web development, JavaScript is used to determine the behavior of every website you see out there. Every clicks, every event, every action, everything that looks like a complex thing just without design, anything that is not just design, anything that the movement of objects around a website, the activities that go on around the website is done using JavaScript. In simple terms, we can say the programming aspect of a website is done using JavaScript. So now, before we create a JavaScript file, I'd love you to know that JavaScript is the language of the web. In my series, the last series, the contact form series, we discussed this extensively. So in this video, we're going to be looking at variables and variable declarations more clearly. So a variable is a container that stores a value. So look at it as a cup. If you put water inside a cup, that cup has a value of water. The water can be removed from the cup, which means a variable in JavaScript can be changed. But in JavaScript, we also have variables that do not change, variables that remain the same with their values throughout the program lifecycle. So a program lifecycle is basically the extended period of time by which the program runs. From the time you start executing the program till when the program is killed, that's till when the execution of the program is done, that variable never changes. So we're going to be looking at the types of variables in code now. So the first thing I want you to know is when learning JavaScript, understanding the basics would actually be very beneficial for you. Understanding how each concept applies are combined to build a solid application is very important, because with this knowledge you will be able to apply the same concepts from JavaScript into other programming languages. So JavaScript is different from HTML and CSS in the sense that it is a programming language. Python is a programming language. C# is a programming language, and all these have their distinct differences, but the similarity between every one of them is that you can use them to write programs and the concepts pretty much are the same. For example, when I started learning JavaScript, I used the same knowledge to learn Python, which I use today. So let's dive straight into code. So now, to create a JavaScript file or to start writing JavaScript, you need to understand that without an HTML file, you can't actually run your JavaScript file. Why? Let me create a first JavaScript file. So I'm going to name this script.js. In my last video, last series, I explained why it is named script.js. It is a scripting language. From the name JavaScript, it is used to write commands for your website, to add programs and commands, special actions in your website. So that's what JavaScript is used for, basically. So before I start writing this code, I'm going to explain why you need an HTML file to run your JavaScript. So let's open our browser really quick. So I have my browser opened. I'm using Google Chrome. I'll also leave a link in the description below to install Google Chrome, and also Mozilla Firefox for those that do not like to use Google Chrome. But this is, for me, by far the best web browser you can use because of its scalability. So let's dive back in. So I'm going to right click on this particular web page because this is a web page, the welcome page, and just to show you guys why HTML file is needed for a JavaScript file to run actually. So look at it very well. Remember, in the last series, I'll leave a link in the description to those videos. I spoke about debugging your code using this particular debugging tool, or we call it the Chrome Developer Tool, inspection tool. Now, what are these? These are HTML elements, right? All these, you see divs, you see this, you see this, you see this. So looking at this very well, this HTML file, let's look at the head. You can see something like script, right? And in this script, you can see something like .lazy_load.js. So HTML, look at HTML as the transporter. Look at HTML as the, let's call it, driver. So before, for example, the bride and the groom, I'm sorry I'm using this example, but for the bride to meet the groom on their wedding day, they need someone to drive them to the place. That's if they are going to be doing their wedding in an event center or something. So for them to actually get to meet each other, they need a driver to take them to the event center. So basically, that's the same thing with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. For your styles and your script files to be loaded on the browser, you need HTML to actually render them on the browser for you. So without an HTML file, you cannot see your JavaScript in action. Although there are other forms of JavaScript that we can run out of the browser, which we'll be potentially looking at in this channel, but let's focus on the front-end aspect. So now, with that being understood, I'm going to be closing this up and creating an HTML file, very simple HTML file. We're not going to be doing much in the HTML file. We just want to run our JavaScript file. So to create an HTML file, index.html, you click on that little new file icon, and then you create your index.html file. So now we have our index.html file created. So I'll leave a link in description below to my HTML videos and semantic HTML video that teaches you all you need to know to get started with HTML, which is very straightforward. So to create our boilerplate code, we won't be typing it from scratch. I'll just be using the shortcut, which on Mac is similar. Just hold down your shift and any of the, you see exclamation on any of the numbers there. So just click that shift plus number 1 on Windows, and then you have it created. So now I have my HTML file created. So this is my HTML file with the elements and the text. So now that I have it created, I'm going to name this JavaScript Basics. So now I'm going to also put a simple h1 here. We're not doing much here in the HTML. JavaScript. So having created this particular HTML file, we want to link this particular script file to our index.html file. As we said, you can't have a JavaScript file running on a browser without an HTML element, because HTML is more like the what renders content on the web browser, and JavaScript has to be used within our context. So, but without having to use the script file, we can actually write some JavaScript in our HTML file. In the last series, we spoke of inline CSS and external CSS. I'll leave a link in the description to my CSS video. So now, to create inline CSS, inline JavaScript, we also have the same in JavaScript. It's very similar to writing style in your HTML element. So basically, we have what we call events. So in the last series, I also talked about events, JavaScript events, when we use the add event listener. So we have inline listeners for a particular element. You just want that element to have that. An example of an inline JavaScript event. So we have something like onClick, and then this onClick is basically a JavaScript function that allows us to perform a click event on a particular HTML element. So let's just put a simple console.log h1 clicked, right? So just follow me here. It must be inside a, okay, so it must be inside a double quote. So I can just say h1 clicked. All right, so now yeah, we can't actually see anything here. We can't actually see this console.log in this particular VS Code. This is why I said you need an HTML file to run a JavaScript file. So I'm just going to right click, and after clicking on open with live server. So if you don't have live server installed, in my early videos I said you can always come to extension and just search for live server, and you see this, install this particular one by read day. It's very fast and very efficient as well. So that out of the way, let's continue. So I'm just going to right click and click on open with live server, and it should open in my browser. So you can see our HTML page. So I'm going to put this to the left, right? So let's put this to the left and this to the right. All right, so I have my JavaScript at the right and I have my home page here. So now what I'm going to do next, in order for us to see this console.log, this onClick inline JavaScript function, right, this inline JavaScript code in action. So we're going to right click in this particular browser window, and I'm going to click on inspect, right, inspect. So now that that's opened, we're not concerned with this elements page, we're concerned with the console, because JavaScript runs on a console, and it is because JavaScript uses an interpreter, right? It uses an interpreter which reads it from line to line. So now you can see h1 clicked. Let me reload this so that I can see it in action. So when we click on this particular HTML element, it's not a button, it's not a link, but it's because we've added this particular onClick event. So when we click on this, so you can see that it's showing h1 click. So this is an example of inline JavaScript code. So the next thing that we're going to be doing now is to look at external JavaScript, where we're going to be discussing variables. So I already kept some comments here to guide us in this particular video on focusing on variables and variable declaration. So now to actually connect our JavaScript to our HTML file, we have two ways. The first way is to connect it to the head tag, and the second way is to connect it to the body tag. So now this is the difference. If I type this, so to access my JavaScript file, I just need to put src. Remember image tags in our HTML tutorial, which I'll be leaving a link in the description. To access your file, since it's in the same folder, just click on that script.js, and if you save it, test that we have our JavaScript, we can just say console.log, and we can say JavaScript linked, right? JavaScript linked. So we see that pop up here, JavaScript linked, alongside all these other inline and internal, right? So our JavaScript has been linked. So I'm just going to cancel this, and the second way is to create it in the body. So the difference between it is one will load before the other, right? So if you have a lot of JavaScript, it is best you put it in the head tag, right, so that it loads before your HTML. If you have JavaScript that is not really that important, it's best you load it in the body so that it loads after your HTML has loaded, right? So since we're already talking about variables, we're going to be loading our JavaScript in our body tag. So we can do this slash then script.js and then this. So that's just it. Now that we've created that, we can reload this, and then let's come to the video of today. So variables and variable declaration. So variables, in this place you can see something like variables are containers that store a value in a memory location. So basically what this means is that variables are containers. I gave an illustration of when you have a cup and then you put water inside. That cup is a variable. The memory location is where you keep the cup, and the value is the water that is inside the cup. So that's a very simple illustration of variables. And we have three ways that we create variables in JavaScript, right? So the first way is using the let keyword. So in this place we say, in other words, let reserved keywords. So basically what this means is that this reserved simply means that these keywords, let, is only to be used when you are accessing JavaScript functionality. You can't use the let to create a variable. You can't have something like let as a variable name. No, it is reserved for creating variables. It is reserved for special functionalities of the programming language JavaScript. So let's now create a variable using the let keyword, right? So we're going to be doing that in this particular space. So to create a variable using the let keyword, we have something like let, and then your variable name. In this case, we're going to be creating a variable known as user, and then an assignment operator that assigns this particular user variable name to our value. So the value here will give it a string saying Toby, right? So then we now terminate it. So this is known as a variable declaration. So variable declaration is basically when you create a variable that has a value, right? And variable initialization is when you create a variable that doesn't have a value. So we can have something like we can just say initial user, right? And then you can just put this, terminate it. So this is variable initialization. We're not declaring the variable because it doesn't have a value, it only has a name, right? But this one we've declared it, so we can put a comment here. So variable initialization. So you should only use variable initialization if this variable is going to be redeclared. It doesn't have a value. For example, number of goals. You're creating a to-do app, you can say to-dos. The user has not created anything, right? So you can just put something like to-dos as, without putting any value, right? The number of to-dos, and then as user creates to-dos, you can keep populating it, because the let keyword allows us to redeclare our variables. So that's, we can say variable initialization, and then you can say variable declaration. So this is a very simple explanation on illustration of creating variables using the let keyword. So let's look at what this says. It says the let keyword lets us initialize, which we just did here, and declare, which we just did down here, a variable that can be redeclared within a program. So what does that mean? Right, so I'm going to put a comment saying variable redeclaration. So variables being redeclared simply means the variable values can be overwritten, and to overwrite something means to give it a new value, right? So it had a value before, but you are giving it a new value. So you don't need to be redeclaring initialized variable, but you should declare initialized variable, and you can redeclare declared variable. So in other words, if you want to change the user's value, you can give it user equal to, let's just use my name, Oluwagbemiga, right? And then if we save this and we access user, it's not going to give us Toby again. It's going to give us Oluwagbemiga. Why? Because we have redeclared our user variable. So that's that about variable redeclaration, initialization, and declaration with the let keyword. So in this one, we're going to be looking at the var keyword. So the var keyword is basically used within a block scope. It's used within scope. Let's just put it that way. So what is scope? Let me put a small comment here saying scope is known as, let's just call it the boundary position or location of a particular we say program or piece of program within the whole program. So this is not really a good definition. This is not really straightforward, but let me just explain. Scope is known as the boundary. Like what do I mean by that? Like for example, this is a whole program. You can have another scope. You can have another boundary without a program, and an example of this is a function. So we can call this function, let's just call it message, send message, right? So this function is going to be sending a message to our browser that the message has sent. One message, we'll just put a demo message inside here. So this is a scope, right? This particular function is a scope inside the whole program. So the reason why we're creating scopes is because the var keyword should be used only within a scope, and it cannot be accessed outside of that scope. So variables created with the var keyword are for a scope, and they cannot be accessed outside of the scope. So an example of this is our message variable. So this message variable is created only inside our send message function, and once the function executes and it is executed and terminated, the variable dies with the function until when we execute the function again. So let's just give this message sent. That's the name of our var variable. So you can see this. So this is also known as a local variable. Why? Because it's only access to this particular scope. This is a local scope, and then this is a global scope, right? The global scope is the program itself, and variables that are available in the global scope are declared using the let keyword. Variables that are accessed in the local scope are declared using the var keyword. So you should not be declaring variables like let something equal to this inside a scope. You should use var. So that's what the var is used for, local variable. So now we want to use this variable only within our scope. Imagine if I try to console.log this variable outside of that function. Let's see what it gives us. So you can see it's giving us an error, message not defined, because it is not available in the global scope. It is only available inside this particular scope. So we move this up here, and then you can see that it's not showing anything. Why? Because we've not executed our function. So if let's just execute the function in our contact form series. We spoke on functions. So you can see message sent line 28 here according to this place, the console.log. So that's that about the var keyword. So you can also redeclare. So let me just put that variables created or variables declared using the var keyword can be redeclared. That means they can be overwritten. Their values can be changed and redeclared. So I can say the message to be equal to, let me just say message not sent, right? Message not sent. So now you can see that the message is not sent. It has been changed from message sent to message not sent. So you can actually redeclare a variable with the var keyword, but it should be used within a scope. You can also redeclare a variable using the let keyword as we did here, but it should not be used within a scope. It should only be used globally, right? So they perform the same function, it's just the boundary where they are that is different. So now the last way to define a variable is using the constant. So I would not call this a variable because variables change, constants don't. So to create a constant, let's first read this. The const keyword allows us to define constants which values don't change throughout the program's life cycle. So this is the life cycle. As the program runs, the program is still on. Once we close this and we stop running this program, the program has died. So that's what the life cycle is known for. So to create a constant, I'm sorry, I'm running fast. So to create a constant, use the const keyword, right? And then let's create a simple constant such as, for example, we don't want the user to ever log out. We just want the user to remain logged in into our application. So this is just us mocking or we're just using a simple illustration of the real world. So user logged in, we can say something like okay, we can say something like true, since we don't want them to ever log out. So now you can see if I console.log user logged in, it's going to give us this true, right, in line 39 as we see here. It will not make sense for me to now say I want to redeclare this particular variable. Why? Because it is a constant. You can see assignment to a constant variable. So because JavaScript is an interpreter, what is an interpreter? An interpreter is basically a type of translator that allows you to that reads your code line by line. JavaScript will not allow you to go to the next line. If I have something like console.log, there's no problem with this console.log. I can say something like just 15, console.log 15. JavaScript will not allow you to go to this next line if there's an error in the previous line. So that's what interpreters are for, which is very, very helpful when you are debugging your code. So let's cancel this. So we can't redeclare a constant. Why? Because it is, the value remains the way it is, what it has been set to. You can only change it where you declared it. So false, and to give us false. So why will you want to be doing this? Why will you want to be doing this if you know you were not going to? Why will you want to create a constant if you know you are going to change the value? So only use constants for when you create variables that don't change. So let's read what this says. In other words, the const keyword can be used to define variables in a block scope. What does this mean? I can also create a constant inside a scope. So let's call this particular function, let's call it what should we use? Print user, okay, a simple scenario. So let's just use this simple scenario, print user account details, right? So I'm just mocking the real world, so I can just say console.log. So let's create a variable, a constant that doesn't change, right? This particular variable doesn't change. You can say const user account details. So I can just put something like let's just put 5 or 50,000 remaining. Here, just using this in the user's account details. So you can say user account details. So if we do this, you can see we created a constant inside of our scope, this function scope, right? Print user account details. So if I console.log this, if I run the function print user accounts details, you can see that it's giving us that particular value from our constants that we declared here. Imagine if I try to access this user account details, console.log user account details outside of that scope, even if it's a constant, you see that it's not going to give us, it's not going to say it is defined. Why? Because it is not in the global scope. So also when you are accessing variables in this console, it is only accessing the global scope. Anything that's been defined inside any other scope that is not globally defined is not going to be accessed by your console here. So this is only for global scope. So it's best you, if you want to protect some information, you don't want it to be console or logging things. For example, when you deploy or you launch your app, you can always use scopes to test your application, which we'll be doing in videos to come from now. So that's about the 3 ways to create variables. So the demo section here, which I would love us to really do, is, for example, now you have a guessing game, right? And in this guessing game you have a function determine guess. So this function is determining the guess of the user. I'm sorry I'm using functions. I'm using functions in this variable video because in my last series we spoke about functions, right? And the treating scope for var allowed us to start using functions, right? But I'll cover functions in more details in like 3 to 4 videos from now. So determining the guess of the user, this particular function determines the guess of the user. So let's just put that. So the type of variables that we're going to be using here are the user's guess, and the second one is the computer guess. So let me just put that apostrophe there for correct English. So now this is a challenge for you. What type of variable keyword are we going to use to define or declare the user's guess variable and the computer's guess variable? I want you to leave your answer in the comment section below. In the next video, I'm going to be revealing the type of variable keyword, but I want you to actually comment below. This shows me that you're actually following this particular series. So thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. And the project that we're going to be building is tailored to e-commerce people that are doing buying and selling, people that are into business. So we're going to be building a fully fledged, I would say, client side e-commerce application that allows you to log in, add your products, that allows you to buy and sell, that allows you to impute your product, and gives you a shopping cart that would gives you a shopping cart to add your product, and just that kind of e-commerce projects. We'll be looking at it in more detail as we go on in this particular channel, this particular series. I'll be creating more and more mini projects to reinforce our learning of JavaScript concepts. So thank you very much for staying till this one. The next video, we're going to be talking about data types, data structures, and naming conventions in JavaScript. See you in the next one. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment. Share this video with as many people that are interested in learning web development, and also to support me on my channel and encourage me, because this keeps me on in creating quality videos like this. So thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.